it is important that these protest groups end, that their actions, their words that we hear, not be drowned out now by not attending to the curfew. As we move into the evening, we have ample resources to not just protect our critical sites and protect our businesses and retails throughout the city, but also to ensure that those individuals who remain on our streets to prey upon our communities will be held accountable. I joined the law enforcement leaders of LA County today, by DA Lacey as well as City Attorney Fuhrer. And all of us are committed to hearing, recognizing, and acknowledging the failures of our past. But as we move forward, we must assure every member of our public of our unbending efforts to ensure your safety. The presence of the National Guard, the Safer at Home Directive, and now the curfew, and the mobilization of LAPD is our control factions to restore that. But I'll last close with what my remarks were this morning in another media engagement. And that is to these organizers, is for them to join with us in calling for peace and showing the volume of their power to be that agent that restores peace in our community, not by policing power, but by their power of talking to the community, those advocacy, those groups of needing social justice, of let's achieve that through peace. Tonight, as I close, I wish us a safe night, and I thank the men and women of LAPD and LA Fire and all of our first responders for their sacrifice, their dedication, their valor. I was able, and I'll announce, to meet with and see the release of a young officer whose skull was fractured Saturday night during one of these protests that turned violent. After metal plates and stitches and staples, by the grace of God and the power of surgery and medicine, he was able to survive those injuries and is now resting safely at home. I'm thankful for his survival. I am grateful for his service, as I am to every member of this of LAPD. Thank you.
Chief Terrazas.
Thank you, Mayor. The men and women of the Los Angeles City Fire Department continue to protect the lives and property of the people of Los Angeles. We've been able to respond to hundreds of fire and medical calls in the protest areas in the past 4 days, while simultaneously responding to our daily average of 1,400 emergencies throughout the city. We've also sent firefighters to our fire service partners in the cities of Beverly Hills and Santa Monica who faced civil unrest this past weekend, and we're prepared to continue that support as needed. And we have done so without incurring any firefighter injuries. Our firefighters also continue to support the city's only active drive-through COVID testing site at Dodger Stadium, for which we have raised the capacity to 7,700 people per day. You can schedule an appointment for testing at coronavirus.lacity.org/testing. As I said yesterday, it is critical that our firefighters and paramedics are able to respond to emergencies to do their jobs without interference from protesting crowds. We respect the right to protest peacefully, but I ask you to make the right choice. When a fire engine or ambulance is trying to get to the scene of an emergency, to answer the call for help. Seconds count when a person has a heart attack or their home or business is engulfed with flames. Any delay of our firefighters can truly result in a life or death situation. The LAFD remains ready to protect the people of Los Angeles, and I ask everybody to abide by the 6 p.m. curfew that has been set for the city of Los Angeles so we can continue to do the very important job of keeping Los Angeles safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs. As we know, we're fighting more than one battle right now, one for justice and for peace in our city, but also the other with our ongoing struggle against the COVID-19 crisis, which even in these hard times does not let up. For 2 minutes, let me update you on that. Today we saw, I think as some may know, but many may have lost, the number of new cases went up under about 1,000, 978 today, a 1.8% increase. And deaths, we had 22 more announced to reach a total of 2,384 fallen from COVID-19. I also want to confirm that now we have 3,510 beds available, of which nearly 3,000 are occupied with more than 3,000 people who are experiencing homelessness to have shelter in this emergency. And we have 331 isolation rooms as well. We also have sufficient hospital beds, over 1,216 ventilators available, and the 100,000 N95 masks that came here that we are sharing with our hospitals at cost are now in our warehouse. We've administered nearly 500,000 tests, as I mentioned, spent nearly $50 million to date on these tests. And we have been doing that both at the testing centers as well as on Skid Row and with people experiencing homelessness, and in now all of our senior skilled nursing facilities. Finally, we've handed out nearly $20 million in cash assistance through Angelino cards. We've also had business ambassadors who are working hard and through what we saw, the unrest, to be able to help businesses reopen at thousands, now over 2,800 different businesses, and served more than 1 million meals to seniors. We also have awarded microloans to our businesses now at $1.9 million, and we'll continue to push forward with those. I hope later in the week to share with you too in this moment, not only how we are addressing COVID-19, but to address some of the underlying calls for justice and for investments that are ongoing in our communities. Happy to answer questions about COVID-19 as well as, of course, what's at hand. But I thank you all for the work you will do to be safe tonight, to abide by the curfew, to stay at home also when you're allowed to be out whenever possible, and to move forward. With that, be happy now to answer questions.
All right, you've been listening to Mayor Eric Garcetti, as well as LAPD's Chief Michael Moore, as well as LA City Fire Chief Ralph Terrazas, all talking about the safety to try to restore and safety to the community. All three stress the importance of people adhering and abiding by the curfew, which will go into effect in about less than 15 minutes at 6 p.m. It will last until 6 a.m. So unless you're an essential worker or you need medical help, you need to stay home or go home.
And we'll have, of course, have more coverage on how effective that curfew is. We have our reporters fanned out across Southern California, and we know that this is a complicated issue. We want to give you a chance to make your voice heard. So please head to abc7.com to tell us why you protest. You can upload a video or picture or write us a paragraph. We want to hear you. We hope to share some of your responses on the air and online.
Also, now moving on, we have been seeing thousands of protesters gathering across the Southland this afternoon.
Inland Empire Bureau Chief Ron McMillan live now for us in Riverside, where a big group of protesters making their voices heard at this point as well. What are you seeing out there, Rob?
Well, very fortunate to report that it's a loud, large, and to this point, extremely peaceful protest here in downtown Riverside. People started gathering around 3 o'clock this afternoon in the park right across from the Mission Inn Hotel, and the crowd grew to close to 4,000 people, and around 4 o'clock, they poured out into the street. Now, interestingly enough, and we see this with a lot of the big protests around here, the police department has taken a very hands-off approach to this point. Riverside Police Department, as well as Riverside County Sheriff's Department and other agencies, is here in force, but they're not visible. In fact, we have seen very few police officers, with the exception of a few motorbikes that went by about 30 seconds ago. Very few police officers here, and that's by design. I was speaking with a spokesperson with the Riverside Police Department who tells me that's what they're trying to do. They don't want to agitate any of these folks. They want to allow them to protest and do so peacefully. And it's been very loud, very large. We estimate close to 4,000 people out here right now. Obviously, they're in the streets. They shouldn't be doing that. But the Riverside Police Department content to let them have their way and exercise their voice. As we've been saying, I mean, you have a lot of people decades and generations of pain and anger that have built up, and it's really spilled out over the past week. And so the police department content to allow these people to protest. Again, the curfew, though, is set to hit in about 10 minutes. So it will be interesting to see what happens when we hit that 6 o'clock curfew here in Riverside. But most would agree, a very peaceful protest at this point. I asked the police department, has there been any property damage or anything like that? They said only one report of a window broken out in a vehicle, but they haven't even been able to really investigate that yet. So at this point, very loud, but very peaceful in downtown Riverside. Rob McMillan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Rob, thank you very much. Let's take a look now. Here, of course, on the first night of the protesting, downtown LA was one of the focal points, and there were disturbances, there was violence. What we're seeing now has been largely peaceful, although there have been National Guard troops that have been stationed outside LA City Hall. And we're going to keep an eye on things now. Right now, there you see the curfew is about to begin in about 10 minutes in the city of Los Angeles. The mayor calling on people to come home, and you see a group of demonstrators here. Trying to see where this is. And you see police there lined up in front of it. That is LAPD headquarters. I thought it was, but I wanted to be sure of it before I said it. You've got some National Guard troops who are stationed there as well. And the protest, the demonstration here in front of LAPD headquarters, peaceful so far. I don't see any scuffles. I don't see anything going on there.
Yeah, and you see the National Guard right behind the LAPD officers. Again, we were talking about this. You see the National Guard out when they're deployed. You certainly know it's very serious. You can see one of the officers on a megaphone obviously talking to the crowd, but we do have that curfew. It goes into effect in about 8 minutes or so, so it will be interesting to see if this crowd disperses and does go home. And also what we've been seeing, many of the sort of landmarks that need to be protected, they've been putting up these steel barricades to keep people away, and they certainly have kept this building and this environment very safe between the LAPD officers and the National Guard right behind them. So an added level of safety and security there. And
it's a literal representation of what the Guard is here to do. They are supposed to literally back up the LAPD, and you're seeing them actually physically doing that at this time. It's the police who are supposed to be on the front line facing off against demonstrators. You don't want military people doing that if you can possibly avoid it, not because they are not good people, but because they're not trained specifically for this sort of mission. And you've got police officers who are trained and who are trained in crowd control and how to work together in a situation such as this, and trained not to react, not to overreact, and that is the intention here. As we move on, the death that we have witnessed, the destruction that we have been witnessing is especially disturbing for children and teens. A USC specialist for what is called psychological first aid has 5 steps that can help children in these turbulent times. She shared them with Eyewitness News reporter Miriam Hernandez.
If you have been horrified by it all, a child trauma specialist says, imagine what it's doing to an impressionable mind.
Is this real? Can this really be happening? Can this happen to me?
From the death of George Floyd under the knee of a white officer.
If I can't trust the officer on the street, who do I trust?
Watch out! To the behavior of adults. Strategies for crisis recovery based on science have been honed at the USC School of Social Work. Yet this unrest is unlike any other, including the LA riots. Professor Holly Priebe-Sotelo says today's scenes on social media are unfiltered, inescapable, and damaging.
Even in 1992, when the civil unrest happened in South LA, today what we have is more exposure.
The response, a 5-step process called psychological first aid. 1, listen.
Making sure that you are listening without judgment, not interrupting them.
2, protect.
What do you need right now to feel safe?
3, connect with people who are comforting.
What would help you right now to feel connected again?
4, model calm behavior.
They are watching your tone of voice. They're watching the expressions on your face. They need to know that you are in control, even if you don't feel like you're in control. They need you to be their guide, their protector.
5, teach how to relax, be the calm in the middle of the storm.
It is okay to protest. It is okay to express your First Amendment right, to speak up against issues that people feel are unjust. But parents also, and the older people on the streets, need to know that there are young people out there and they're watching and they're absorbing everything that you do. So it's important that we be good role models to these young people.
Miriam Hernandez, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Psychological first aid. Wow.
All right. Well, there is much more news coming up on Eyewitness News at 6 o'clock. Here's Ellen Leyva with a preview.
Ahead at 6 o'clock, the latest on breaking news as peaceful protests turned sideways. A demonstration in Van Nuys was declared an unlawful assembly when looters started to hit nearby stores. Plus, some local businesses trying to protect their property with more protests planned across Southern California. These stories and breaking news as it happens, all coming up on Eyewitness News at 6.